Chapter 3. Life with Father. Pretoria, the 1980s. The Move. At age 10, Musk made a fateful decision, one that he would later regret. He decided to move in with his father. He took the dangerous overnight train from Durban to Johannesburg on his own. When he spotted his father waiting for him at the station, he began beaming with delight like the sun, Errol says. "Hi, Dad, let's get a hamburger," he shouted. That night he crawled into his father's bed and slept there. Why did he decide to move in with his father? Elon sighs and stays silent for almost a minute when I ask this. My dad was lonely, so lonely, and I felt I should keep him company, he finally says. He used psychological wiles on me. He also adored his grandmother, Errol's mother, Cora, known as Nana. She convinced him that it was unfair that his mother had all 3 children and his father had none. In some ways, the move was not all that mysterious. Elon was 10, socially awkward, and had no friends. His mother was loving, but she was overworked, distracted, and vulnerable. His father, in contrast, was swaggering and manly, a big guy with large hands and a mesmerizing presence. His career had many ups and downs, but at that time he was feeling flush. He owned a gold-colored convertible Rolls-Royce Corniche, and, more importantly, 2 sets of encyclopedias, lots of books, and a variety of engineering tools. So Elon, still a small boy, chose to live with him. It turned out to be a really bad idea, he says. I didn't yet know how horrible he was. 4 years later, Kimball followed. I didn't want to leave my brother alone with him, Kimball says. My dad guilted my brother into going to live with him, and then he guilted me. Why did he choose to go live with someone who inflicted pain? Mae Musk asked 40 years later. Why didn't he prefer a happy home? Then she paused for a moment. Maybe that's just who he is. After the boys moved in, they helped Errol build a lodge that he could rent to tourists in the Timbavati Game Reserve, a pristine stretch of bush about 300 miles east of Pretoria. During construction, they slept around a fire at night, with Browning rifles to protect them against lions. The bricks were made of river sand and the roof was grass. As an engineer, Errol liked studying the properties of various materials, and he made the floors out of mica because it was a good thermal insulator. Elephants, in search of water, often uprooted the pipes, and monkeys regularly broke into the pavilions and pooped, so there was a lot of work for the boys to do. Elon often accompanied visitors on hunts. Although he had only a .22 caliber rifle, it had a good scope and he became an expert shot. He even won a local skeet shooting contest, though he was too young to accept the prize of a case of whiskey. When Elon was 9, his father took him, Kimball, and Tosca on a trip to America, where they drove from New York through the Midwest and then down to Florida. Elon became hooked on the coin-operated video games he found in the motel lobbies. It was by far the most exciting thing, he said. We didn't have that yet in South Africa. Errol displayed his mix of flamboyance and frugality. He rented a Thunderbird, but they stayed in budget inns. When we got to Orlando, my father refused to take us to Disney World because it was too expensive, Musk recalls. I think we went to some water park instead. As is often the case, Errol spins a different tale, insisting that they went both to Disney World, where Elon liked the haunted house ride, and to Six Flags over Georgia. I told them over and over on the trip, America is where you will come live someday. 2 years later, he took the 3 children to Hong Kong. My father had some combination of legitimate business and hucksterism, Musk recalls. He left us in the hotel, which was pretty grungy, and just gave us $50 or something, and we didn't see him for 2 days. They watched samurai movies and cartoons on the hotel TV. Leaving Tosca behind, Elon and Kimball wandered the streets, going into electronics stores where they could play video games for free. Nowadays, someone would call the Child Protection Service if someone did what our dad did, Musk says. But for us back then, it was a wondrous experience. A confederacy of cousins. After Elon and Kimball moved in with their father in suburban Pretoria, May moved to nearby Johannesburg so the family could be closer together. On Fridays, she would drive to Errol's house to pick up the boys. They would then go to see their grandmother, the indomitable Winifred Haldeman, who cooked a chicken stew the kids hated so much that May would take them out for pizza afterward. Elon and Kimball usually spent the night at the house next door to their grandmother's where May's sister, Kay Rive, and her 3 boys lived. The 5 cousins, Elon and Kimball Musk and Peter, Lyndon, and Russ Rive, became an adventurous and occasionally contentious herd of bucks. May was more indulgent and less protective than her sister, so they would conspire with her when plotting an adventure. If we wanted to disappear for the day to do something like go to a concert in Johannesburg, she would say to her sister, "I'm going to take them to church camp this evening," says Kimball. Then she would drop us off and we would go do our mischief. Those trips could be dangerous. I remember once when the train stopped there was an immense fight and we watched a guy get stabbed through the head, says Peter Rive. We were hiding inside the car, then the doors closed, and we were moving on. Sometimes a gang would board the train to hunt down rivals, rampaging through the cars, shooting machine guns. Some of the concerts were anti-apartheid protests, such as one in 1985 in Johannesburg that drew 100,000 people. Often brawls would break out. We didn't try to hide from the violence, we became survivors of it, says Kimball. It taught us not to be afraid, but also to not do crazy things. Elon developed a reputation for being the most fearless. When the cousins went to a movie and people were making noise, he would be the one to go over and tell them to be quiet, even if they were much bigger. It's a big theme for him to never have his decisions guided by fear, Peter recalls. That was definitely present even when he was a child. He was also the most competitive of the cousins. One time when they were riding their bicycles from Pretoria to Johannesburg, Elon was way out in front pedaling fast, so the others pulled over and hitched a ride in a pickup truck. When Elon rejoined them, he was so angry that he started hitting them. It was a race, he said, and they had cheated. Such fights were common. Often they would happen in public, the boys oblivious to their surroundings. One of the many that Elon and Kimball had was at a country fair. They were wrestling and punching each other in the dust, Peter recalls. People were freaking out, and I had to say to the crowd, "This is not a big deal, these guys are brothers." Although the fights were usually over small things, they could get vicious. The way to win was to be the first person to punch or kick the other guy in the balls, Kimball says. That would end the fight because you can't continue if you get crunched in the balls. The student. Musk was a good student, but not a superstar. When he was 9 and 10, he got A's in English and math. He is quick to grasp new mathematical concepts, his teacher noted. But there was a constant refrain in the report card comments. He works extremely slowly, either because he dreams or is doing what he should not. He seldom finishes anything. Next year he must concentrate on his work and not daydream during class. His compositions show a lively imagination, but he doesn't always finish in time. His average grade before he got to high school was 83 out of 100. After he was bullied and beaten in his public high school, his father moved him to a private academy, Pretoria Boys High School. Based on the English model, it featured strict rules, caning, compulsory chapel, and uniforms. There he got excellent grades in all but 2 subjects, Afrikaans, he got a 61 out of 100 his final year, and religious instruction, not extending himself, the teacher noted. I wasn't really going to put a lot of effort into things I thought were meaningless, he says. I would rather be reading or playing video games. He got an A in the physics part of his senior certificate exams, but somewhat surprisingly, he got only a B in the math part. In his spare time, he liked to make small rockets and experiment with different mixtures, such as swimming pool chlorine and brake fluid, to see what would make the biggest bang. He also learned magic tricks and how to hypnotize people, once convincing Tosca that she was a dog and getting her to eat raw bacon. As they would later do in America, the cousins pursued various entrepreneurial ideas. One Easter, they made chocolate eggs, wrapped them in foil, and sold them door to door. Kimball came up with an ingenious scheme. Instead of selling them cheaper than the Easter eggs at the store, they made them more expensive. Some people would balk at the price, he says, but we told them, "You're actually supporting future capitalists." Reading remained Musk's psychological retreat. Sometimes he would immerse himself in books all afternoon and most of the night, 9 hours at a stretch. When the family went to someone's house, he would disappear into their host's library. When they went into town, he would wander off and later be found at a bookstore sitting on the floor in his own world. He was also deeply into comics. The single-minded passion of the superheroes impressed him. They're always trying to save the world, with their underpants on the outside or these skin-tight iron suits, which is really pretty strange when you think about it, he says. But they are trying to save the world. Musk read both sets of his father's encyclopedias and became, to his doting mother and sister, a genius boy. To other kids, however, he was an annoying nerd. "Look at the moon, it must be 1,000,000 miles away," a cousin once exclaimed. Replied Elon, "No, it's like 239,000 miles, depending on the orbit." One book that he found in his father's office described great inventions that would be made in the future. "I would come back from school and go to a side room in my father's office and read it over and over," he said. Among the ideas was a rocket propelled by an ion thruster which would use particles rather than gas for thrust. Late one night at the control room of his rocket base in South Texas, Musk described the book at length to me, including how an ion thruster would work in a vacuum. "That book is what first made me think about going to other planets," he said.